Hi. It's Monday and it looks like I'm looking at the top right hand corner because I decided, so I'm going to try and look at the little spy hole in the camera, because I decided this week to record from my phone because I think the video quality is better than from the laptop. So I've kind of set myself up in this lovely little space. When I sat here 10 minutes ago, you could see a beautiful sky out of the window with lovely clouds and all sorts of prettiness, but tonight is a bit of an experiment with the old phone, so I hope it's going okay. We'll see. At least I won't have any connectivity issues tonight, probably. So I have to tell you that we are what are we? We're like day 2 of British summertime with the clocks going back. It's been a frigging nightmare. So we had one that was awake until about 11 o'clock last night and then one that was up at 4:30 this morning. So I am not as with it as I have been on some Mondays. I've got my customary cup of tea, not wine this week. If I have wine this week, I'll literally pass out, I have no doubt. So it's cups of tea. It's very careful notes this week. And hi Nat, you made it. How is it? How is it, your mum's? Good, I hope. I hope somebody's cooking for you for a change. It would be nice. Yeah. Oh, it's so lovely to see you. I was just saying that it's been a mad day with the kids because of the sleep. So look at these bad boys under my eyes. It's horrendous. And it's tea, not wine tonight, obviously. So tonight, I'm on time, despite being knackered, and we are going to talk, or no, I am going to talk tonight about what happens when it all goes wrong. It's one of my least favourite phrases. Oh, hang on. Oh, no, a bunny in the bath. We've had that before. One of my kids, the middle child, flushed the eldest child's teddy bear down the toilet when he was about 18 months old. Like, properly flushed it down the toilet. It disappeared, never to be seen again. It was horrendous. We had right dramas. I hope she's okay. I hope she goes down and that you get a peaceful night. It's a nightmare this next couple of days with them all sort of adjusting to, yeah, exactly that face. That is exactly the face that we all pulled. It's a nightmare, isn't it, this next couple of days, getting everybody settled back in to sleep and getting back to the routine. This morning was just awful. So it'll be a better night tonight. Look at me with my positive face on. It'll be much better tonight. It'll be lovely. So, cups of tea. What happens when things don't go according to plan, or things go wrong? That's the phrase I hear a lot. Oh yeah, but you know, what happens when it all goes wrong? And it's kind of one of my least favourite phrases when it all goes wrong, because I think it's a really undermining phrase. It kind of presupposes that there's a right and a wrong way to give birth. That if you do it in one way, that's the right way, and if it happens in any other way, that's the wrong way. And it applies a judgment to the birth and to the birthing mother that strikes me as kind of unfair, and I don't love it. My view kind of is that every single birth is a continuation of new life. You know, every new birth is wonderful and a wonder, and it's a new opportunity. And actually, birth itself is sort of a continuation of women's power and women's ability to create life, like brand new life. And the power of women to sustain and to nurture life. And every birth is a transformative event, whether it's the first baby or your 6th baby. It will transform your life. You will be a somehow somewhat different person afterwards. And so I think and therefore every woman has the right to, I'm just going to flick that up on my little screen. See, look, this is the thing that happens. There we go, it's gone. Yeah, and because of that, you know, every birth should be a celebration of the individual woman and her ability to create life. I just think it's every single birth should be celebrated, and every woman should be able to access that augmentation to her, that transformation, as a positive event, I think. So talking about it going wrong sounds kind of negative to me on a couple of levels. So I challenge that. I think that really often what we're talking about is suffering rather than things going wrong. Yeah, so today's session is a little bit about that, and we're going to talk a little bit about what going wrong means for lots of people, and we're going to talk a little bit about hypnobirthing techniques and how they are perfect for, you know, they're exactly what you need in a situation where you're feeling vulnerable or scared or out of control or not listened to. And then we're going to talk about what this means to you and your birth. Not you two who are watching, obviously, because I think at least one of you isn't going to do it anymore. One of you might. One of you probably will. So therefore, that's good. But however, there we go. So as usual, when I say as usual, I mean as of last week, the content from this is going to be available on the website for you to download from tomorrow, which will be good. So, moving rapidly straight into my waffle, which I'm going to try and kind of wrap up by about 8:30 tonight, partly because I'm not sure, given how knackered I am, that I'm going to be able to go on for much longer than that. But hey ho, here we go. Hi Carly Gudgeon, good to see you, lady. Tea this week, my love, not wine, tea. But I'm struggling womanfully on. Oh. So, where I was going to kick off is that we are this thing about birth going wrong is drummed into us from, you know, when we start thinking about birth, really. So if you think about drama on TV, and hi darling, it's good to see you. If you think about drama on the TV and movies, comedy, you know, birth is always positioned as a really risky moment, and historically it is true that birth has been very risky, but it is also fair to say that historically the risks in birth were more about infection and blood loss than they were about anything else. So the greatest risks that women faced when they were birthing historically were blood loss that couldn't be staunched or stopped or replaced or replenished, and also infection, because obviously hygiene standards were pretty shit in mud huts, I'm going to say. A One Born Every Minute is a brilliant example of that, because it's positioned as entertainment and it's edited to be entertaining. So actually the bits that we see are the bits that are the most dramatic. So they're bits where women are losing control, or when medics need to step in, or when situations have stalled and things start to change, because it's change that makes for good drama and good entertainment. And one of the other ways that reasons that we associate birth with risk is that birth is positioned within the NHS, and it's positioned within the NHS for good reason, because there are occasions where medicine needs to intervene, and it's absolutely right and appropriate that it should. But one of the unintended consequences of that is that all births are perceived to be risky by women and families, because, you know, the only time that we go to hospitals is when we're sick or unwell. So, you know, to position births in hospitals kind of gives it that same kind of feeling. And also a lot of traditional antenatal classes do this as well. I remember sitting in antenatal classes and the focus is, you know, this is what happens when things go wrong. And things go wrong can be anything from, you know, a required intervention to you not being able to cope anymore, or the pain being too much, or you being too tired to carry on. So a lot of what we learn about birth is about risk and about suffering and about things not really working out. And also other women, you know, we have this sort of spiraling culture where what we expect of labour and birth is suffering, and therefore we don't have, I talked about this the other week, so therefore we don't have another model of birth being positive, and because we don't have a model of a positive birth and an opportunity for it to kind of feel like something good that we can experience, then lots of women experience it negatively. And I absolutely do not say this to undermine women who've had a difficult experience or a traumatic experience, because that is an actual lived experience. I'm suggesting that without the model of a good birth, it's harder and harder to actually to actually put yourself in a position where you can interpret your experience positively, and therefore we get into that cycle. I mean, I can think of a number of women in the generation above me who I've spoken to who've talked about birth in the most horrendous terms. And I think it's fair to say that particularly in the 1970s, women had pretty unpleasant, invasive experiences when they were labouring. I think about my mum talking about what her labour with me was like. Bloody really dehumanising and unpleasant. I really didn't want to go through that, and actually that's one of the things that contributed to me deciding or opting for home births, because her experiences had been so unpleasant. It really wasn't something that I wanted to go through, so I didn't. And so then if we think about what going wrong actually means in that context, people talk about things going wrong and they talk about being overdue and then being induced and then being monitored, and then episiotomies and epidurals and Von-2s and forceps and emergency sections, feeling very unwell. You know, there's a whole list of things that people talk about when they talk about things not going well. And there is nothing inherently wrong with those things. Like right up at the beginning, I just want to be really clear, in my view, that if you choose to have an induction, or you choose to rock up to hospital and say, "Hi, I'm here, can I have my episiotomy please," as the woman I'm seeing tomorrow wants to do, that is absolutely your judgment. You know, women go into labour and birth with a whole series of sort of contexts and stories that carry them in, and expectations and fears and anxieties. And also labours can be long, and they can be tiring, and they can be intense, and some people experience them as being very, very painful. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so Nat's saying I had an episiotomy and it wasn't a wrong thing and I've never felt that way. That is exactly the attitude that I think hypnobirthing women have, is that you make the right decision and say, well, I'm going to kind of go round and round and come to that. I do think, though, that a lot of people assume that because we teach hypnobirthing, Nat, that we have an expectation of a particular type of birth, that a particular type of birth is the right way to do it, or is the thing that you should be aiming for. And actually, when I did the Mongan method back in 2010, it's so long ago, when I did the Mongan method then, there was a really clear direction towards spontaneous labour, don't accept an induction, don't have a sweep, don't take drugs, epidurals are bad, drugs are bad, you should do it as naturally as possible. I think Mongan went so far as to say you should try and do it as quietly as possible as well, you know. And so I think that there is a traditional kind of hangover for some of that. But actually it's not the case. You know, every woman has the right to make that choice. However, the converse of that is that every woman has the choice not to. That if you have an alternative option that you'd like to address the situation with, then you have the right to make that decision too, if you prefer, if that's your preference. And I think the other thing when we talk about things going wrong, so I think there are two other things that sort of percolate in the back of my brain when people talk about birth going wrong, what if it goes wrong, is that it presupposes that some methods of, Tina says, beautiful birthday at birth centre, wouldn't have delivered there without an episiotomy. And I can't read the rest of it, Tina, but I'm going to read it later. And yeah, I think that's, yeah, okay, so mother wouldn't have delivered there without an episiotomy. And again, that's one of the things that I'm going to come back and talk to towards the end, those attitudes of adaptability and resilience. You know, the adaptability is being able to cope with any new situation or any new context, and the resilience is having the wherewithal to see that change, stop, pause, and come back and go at it again, which is lovely. I think when you talk about things going wrong, it presupposes that some methods of labour and birth are more right and others are not more right. And I think that's one of the things that lots of women find very challenging about being pregnant and giving birth, is that there are all these opinions and judgments flying around in a way that there kind of aren't about lots of other things in life. It's very interesting to me that this field, this area area of your life, this time of your life, is so full of these really trenchant opinions. And actually, I think that often those opinions are about experience rather than about facts of whether it's the right or the wrong way to do it. But I also think the other thing that it does, which can be really upsetting for some people, is that when you talk about things going wrong, it kind of to some degree also undermines the trauma that some women who experienced an otherwise normal birth experience. You know, I have spoken to women who didn't have an induction and didn't have an episiotomy and didn't have an epidural, had what would have been described as a straightforwardly good birth, but experienced trauma. So I think that making it kind of black and white, that this kind of birth is good and that kind of birth is not good, is really unhelpful on a number of different levels. And actually, my experience is that once you start to drill down a little bit and talk to women who talk about their births having gone wrong, what they're actually expressing is that they're actually expressing a form of suffering. So it's not like exactly as Nat and Tina have just said, it's not about the act of the episiotomy or the epidural or anything like that. It's about suffering. And I did a little bit of extra reading this afternoon about, you know, what does suffering actually mean? Because I make some assumptions about what that word means. But I was just having a look in some of my philosophy books that I've got tucked around the shelf. Oh, I should take a swig of tea, hang on. And actually, suffering relates to hardship. Hi, Sarah Leslie. Good to see you, lady. How are you? Are your babies asleep? I can still hear noise from mine upstairs, so I'm sorry. So this, just as an aside, I'm just going to pause. We were watching this afternoon. Do you remember that little bit? The guy who was talking about South Korea on the BBC News, and his kids burst in, and then the wife came and dragged the kids back, and it was very funny. I just had a moment just before I started the live thinking that that's potentially what's going to happen with my kids this afternoon, because they're still buggering about upstairs. Oh, hi A, how you doing, little man? Yeah, see, my middle friend had trouble going to bed tonight because it's still daylight outside. He thought it was too hard. So where we got to is we were talking about suffering and what suffering actually is. Suffering is about hardship, and it's about physical pain often, but it's also about lack of control and not knowing where you're going. And I was just having a little read through the Buddhist interpretation of suffering, and that suffering is about, I can't bear this, and this shouldn't be happening, and when is it going to end, and what is going to happen next, and will I be able to cope? Which means that the opposite side of that is knowing that you don't need to bear it, that you don't need to suffer. And that is really the essence of what birth preparation should be about. It's partially about making sure that people are really well informed so that they know what their choices and their options are. And understanding what your choices and options are means you don't have to suffer it. You don't have to bear it. There are the options that are available to you, and you should feel totally confident about making those decisions in the right time. And I think that the reason that hypnobirthing is so vital in this situation, I mean, I part of me thinks, you know, I had 3 very different births, 3 very different types of birth, although they were all at home and they were all relatively straightforward. I had one very long one startlingly quick one, and then one kind of perfect, Tina, me, Ray, a baby. It was just lovely and fantastic. But I kind of think I was lucky with that, and I think hypnobirthing was really important in helping me access that as a possibility, and the techniques were really important in helping me just manage and flow. But where something like hypnobirthing really comes into its own, I think, is when people have less than straightforward births and have to make those slightly more difficult decisions or more complex decisions, particularly when they've gone at it. We talk a lot about women's power and the force of creation and how you can make your own choices. And yeah, I know, Tina, that when that thing popped up today about 4 years, made me think about when Dunks was born, because I must have been, oh no, it must have been just after that happened. Anyway, it was lovely. I just had a very lovely little moment about our lovely little moments together. So I was talking about hypnobirthing, and so hypnobirthing is not just good for the avoidance of things, so the avoidance of pain and the avoidance of suffering and the avoidance of pharmacological pain relief or medical intervention, but it's also good for the gaining of things and the access of things. And the gaining of things is things like control, being controlled enough to lose control, being I'm just having a little look down at my notes now because I feel like I've been rattling on just a wee bit, maintaining your calm and your voice, having a voice and being able to have that voice heard, which is really important if you're in a situation where your birth is a little bit more challenging for whatever reason. And sometimes challenging births are not just about the physiology of you and your baby. Sometimes challenging births can be about the environment. I had a very long conversation with my sister last week who had a really quite traumatic first birth, and she was talking about how the less than gentle and supportive midwives had made her labour harder because she didn't feel supported. She felt even more vulnerable than she needed to feel in that moment. So when I start, hey Danny Griffiths, how are you? Good to see you, lady. I hope you're well. We are well overdue a coffee. Well overdue a coffee. I think we're supposed to be booking one in before too long. I'm sure we are. It means I'm going to have to text you tomorrow to see if we can get a date in. Now, oh God, it's going to have to be at the end of April though, because we've got Easter coming up, haven't we? Kids break up on Thursday. Horrors. Yes, so hypnobirthing is valuable not only in the avoidance of things, but also in the gaining of things like calm, power, control, and your voice. And I was thinking about this afternoon. I was thinking there are kind of 5 things that hypnobirthing gives you that is really, or that can be really important when your birth is less than straightforward. And those things are adaptability, resilience, vulnerability, instinct, and acceptance. And underpinning all of that, of course, the primary thing that I think hypnobirthing gives you is control. Because with information about how your body works and how you can augment the environment around you, and with an understanding of how you can communicate your preferences, and with a really bonded and well-informed birth partner, you have control that you might not otherwise have. If you don't understand how your body works, if you don't understand what you can do to your environment, if you don't have a birth partner who knows what they're doing. I mean, God, we had a conversation the other day, and it's partly inspired by Nat's live with her husband Luke last week about, you know, birth partners and husbands and what they need, and why hypnobirthing is useful for them. But we have this kind of weird thing where we say to men who know even less about women's bodies than women do, they go, you're going to be the birth partner. Take her to hospital and support her. What? You know, they're suddenly landed in a medical institution surrounded by people who do this for a job, with a woman, their partner, who they love, who might look like she's suffering. She might actually be suffering, and we say support her. I mean, it's a really difficult thing to do unless you're properly prepared for it. So back to my 5 things that will really help you when that hypnobirthing brings, that is really useful when your birth is less than straightforward. So the first one was adaptability, being able to adjust to new conditions. I think the kids have given me a cold. I'm suddenly feeling a bit sore throaty. Adaptability, so the ability to adjust to new conditions without disturbing your flow. And that's the thing, is that mind state. So much of this idea about suffering is feeling that you're out of control or you're not controlling your environment. And so much about the hypnobirthing is being able to control mentally what's going on and maintain your calm, keep a level sort of playing field, a mental level playing field. And the thing about the hypnobirthing is that you can be in any environment, in any situation, and still maintain that kind of that sense that you are controlling what's going on around you, and that you can control what's happening in your body. I mean, even if you can't control the noise and who's present and what's going on, you can control your emotions and you can control your calm. And just going back to what we were saying earlier on about this, about episiotomy sometimes being the good choice, you know, with a hypnobirthing point of view, if you get to the point where you think, you know, the episiotomy is the right thing for me, that's what we're going to do, then you can stay totally cool and calm and collected as that's happening and you're working through that. Resilience is another thing that hypnobirthing brings, the sort of this capacity to recover from adversity. So to be in the situation where the path diverts or diverges from where you wanted it to be or where you expected to be, and to be able to sort of stop and regroup and refocus. And again, that resilience in part comes from surrounding yourself with a really good team, having a really supportive birth partner who really understands what's going on for you. And that's partially about contraction to contraction. So that resilience partly comes from recovering in between those contractions. You know, that period of time you get where you go from that really intense moment to actually everything's fine and I'm just waiting for the next one. So the hypnobirthing gives you that ability to get back on track and keep your focus in between those surges and contractions. But it also is for when things really shift and the path changes. The third thing I think is about vulnerability. Vulnerability is a really interesting one because one of the things that hypnobirthing teachers or coaches ask of their clients is to really think about what it is that you're fearful of or that you're anxious about, and what your preconceptions are and why you have those preconceptions, and whether those preconceptions are things that you want to carry with you or whether they're things that you want to dispatch and move on and move away from. And it's really important to understand that, because understanding what you're fearful of or what your vulnerabilities are can be really important in helping you to understand what decision you want to make next. And I think, you know, when you've also been able to share that with your birth partner and understand what their vulnerabilities are, what their fears and anxieties are, it really bonds you together as a team. And it means that if you are in the situation where you're making decisions that are different from the decisions that you thought you would have to make, or that are challenging your expectations of what you thought your birth could be like, then that gives you an opportunity to make really good risk-benefit analyses that, on reflection, you can feel really confident were the right decisions for you. And that's what it's all about. On reflection, do you think that you made the decision that was right for you on the day? Because I think often when I'm talking to people who say, you know, this thing went wrong, they don't feel that they were making an informed decision. I think often those people are saying, what they're actually saying is, I felt that this was done to me, or that this happened to me, that I was out of control in that situation. The fourth thing is about instinct. And, you know, I really struggled with this when I was pregnant, because I had come from this really commercial environment where instinct was almost actively discouraged. You know, everything was about substantiation and about really formalising your decisions and being able to communicate it with a really clear explanation. It's almost like show you're working in primary school, you know, really understand why it is you've got to this point, why it is you've made these series of decisions. And actually instinct, this is another one that I was looking at this afternoon, instinct, it means the way that we naturally react without thinking or learning. But I challenge that, because I think instinct changes over your life. And actually, for a lot of people, instinct at the end of a hypnobirthing course is different than instinct beforehand, because of what they've learned on that course. So you learn how your body behaves and how you can control your environment to change or augment what's going on around you. So actually, instinct is really important as well, and instinct is something that you can rely on much more comfortably, I think, after you've done a hypnobirthing course than if you just rock up to hospital on the day, because you've played this out in advance. One of the things that we talk about on hypnobirthing courses, and I think probably regardless of which method you go with, so whether you're Calm Birth School or Wise Hippo or Catherine Graves or whoever else you choose to go with, is that hypnobirthing teachers ask you to sort of pre-plan what you think your labour is going to be like. And the good ones will be saying it's not about, you know, at 10 a.m. I did this, at 11 a.m. I did that, at 11:45 this happened, and at 11:52 my baby was born. It's more about how you feel about what's going on and how you are experiencing that environment. Because what you can't do is you can't ever practice a labour. I mean, God, I've had 3 and they were all very different. I mean, Tina and Carly would probably agree with me that you cannot guarantee what birth is going to be like. You can have a fairly good idea, I guess, based on, you know, how people have laboured before, but there's no sense that it's definitely going to be one way or another. And so although you can't practice the labour itself, you can walk yourself through it. And the more you walk yourself through it, the more you practice your calm, the more you practice your relaxation techniques and your breathing techniques, the easier it is to access that on the day. And that's what the hypnobirthing does to instinct, is it allows you to kind of dial that up because you've kind of tested it before. It's a really useful skill to have. And I genuinely didn't believe that I had instinct. And I now know, with the benefit of my 8 years mothering experience, is that instinct is within us if only we know when to listen to it, if only we trust ourselves. And actually, what's often happening when people say they don't have an instinct is they do have an instinct, but they don't trust themselves. And often women are put in a position where they feel they shouldn't trust themselves. Often, and this is something that happens in institutions. So there's a very famous sociologist who was around in the 1950s called Irving Goffman, who wrote about institutions and institutionalization. And that's often what happens in hospitals. It's not that the individuals who work in those institutions are anything other than lovely, selfless people. I mean, I am all for the NHS. I friggin' love midwives. There are 2 on here already that I specifically love personally. But what often happens in an institution like that is you are less of an individual. That statistics become as important as you as an individual. It's not that people are bad, it's not that people are against you, and sometimes hypnobirthing is positioned as being contrary or contrary to the medical model, and I don't believe that should be the case either. I actually think those things work in hand really well. But people's instinct can sometimes be undermined by what's going on around them, which kind of takes me back to that conversation that I had with my sister last week when she was talking about her really traumatic birth. And her instinct was undermined by what was going on around her and what was being said to her, and that's a real shame. And with hypnobirthing techniques, I think you can tune into that instinct more confidently. You also have a more bonded birth partner who's more confident about standing up for what's going on and allowing you to make your individual choices that are right for you. And altogether, I've just made a note here that says, what does my note say? Your instinct is honed. And that's it. So your instinct is honed, and it's what feels right for you in the moment. That's what I was going to say. It's what feels right for you in the moment. So again, one of the things that I often hear about hypnobirthing is, aren't you setting women up to fail? And it's exactly the opposite of that. What we should be doing is setting women up to be really well informed, to make the absolute best of their environment, and then to have the confidence to make the decision that is right for them in that moment. That's the thing. So in that moment, it might be that epidural is the right thing. It might be that cesarean section is the right thing. It might be that you decide to dose up on all of the drugs and just go wild and let go and let other people take control of the situation. That might be the right thing for you in that moment. But you should feel empowered to do that, that it's your decision, that you've taken control of that. And then the last one of my 5 is about acceptance. And I've really struggled with this word because part of me thinks it's about acceptance, part of me thinks it's about gratitude, and that gratitude is partially about finding the positive in your experience. And I think often women are kind of encouraged, or we are in a culture where we are expected to find the worst, or we're expected to find the suffering in our experience. And actually, I think all women should walk away from birth finding their power. Whether that is a free birth in the woods, or a planned home birth, or a birthing centre birth, or a birth in a hospital where you chose to have an epidural and any number or name of interventions, or whether you go and have an elective cesarean. That is a valid choice. It's a totally valid choice. Your birth, if that's what you've chosen to do, is no more or less awesome, and I mean that in the kind of literary sense rather than in the cultural awesome sense. I mean, like, birth is awesome, and every woman should have the right to feel like that. Every woman should walk away with her baby, regardless of how she had that baby, feeling that she's done a bloody incredible job because she created life. And then she's going to nurture and sustain that life, and that little life is an almost endless series of opportunities and explorations and innovations, and it's what makes the world kind of an interesting and exciting place. So I've kind of rattled on a bit tonight. I think either I'm not picking up messages on the phone, or maybe you guys have been a bit quiet. Maybe I'm talking. I feel a bit earnest this evening. Thank you, Tina Gardner. I like a round of applause. It makes me feel good. Yeah, I kind of feel like I've been a bit earnest this evening. Partly, I think, because I'm tired because of this horrendous night's sleep with the kids. But I also think because I really feel quite passionately about this point, about the idea that birth can go wrong. For me, if there is a physically and emotionally healthy woman with a healthy baby at the end, then that all went well, regardless of how it went. And I would love it if every woman could walk out of hospital feeling that. I talk to far too many women who suffered through their labours and who don't want to stand in the street going, "It was a triumph, I'm amazing." And that's what I hope every woman can do. That's my thing. It's 20 to 9. So I'm going to finish my now slightly lukewarm cup of tea. And unless anybody's got anything marvellous to say, I'm going to pick up my phone and I'm going to click end live, and I'm going to head off for the evening and put my feet up and have a really early night, and then start tomorrow feeling a bit more spring-like and exciting. Nothing. So I hope you're all well, and I will speak to you all later. And look, I'm going to pick myself up, look, there we go, and realise that probably you've all been looking at my jumper and my boobs all evening. Madness. Okay, see you later, lovely people. Look after yourselves. Bye.